it. So, where we left off in the corporate coup um, book is talking about Sitco and the plan to basically, um, as part of the economic warfare on Venezuela, to confiscate their U.S. assets, as we've been known to do in the past. And where we left off, Vecchio was supporting Hausman, the Harvard economist turned economic advisor turned international development bank for the Americas, then back to Harvard when he found out he couldn't draw two salaries at the same time. He says that the attorney general that we were talking about, the pretend one, or the fake one, I should say, has been an honest professional who has contributed greatly to protect our assets and joint efforts to cease the usurpation, meaning that the real government of Venezuela was trying to usurp the fake government. It's kind of hard to follow along. Considering Hernandez had done the complete opposite of protecting Venezuelans' asset as the fake attorney general, instead taking deliberate actions that place Sitco's entire existence on the line. Vecchio and Hausman homage to the lawyer was comical at best and deeply deceitful at the worst. Renee, I'm going to bring you up as co-host until Bridget, or with Bridget, if she shows up. So the fraud of Mr. Hernandez is against Guaido and the National Assembly. Jorge Alondro Rodriguez said, who again is part of the opposition, but not in support of a coup. Did you get the request? Let me try it again. I'm going to send you the co-host, Renee. Though it was impossible to prove the motivation behind Vecchio's deceptive acts, a closer look at Sitco's legal wrangling offered a potential clue. I don't know what's going on. I keep sending it to you, Renee. Oh. I don't know. She just got kicked out of the space too. When a court rules that one corporation, such as Corillex, can seize shares belonging to another, such as Sitco, as a debt payment, the shares are not directly transferred company to company. Rather, the court sells off a portion of the indebted company's assets and uses funds raised to pay the claim. That's the normal process. They're auctioned, Rodriguez explained. In Sitco's case, this meant the court would oversee the fire sale of roughly $1.2 billion worth of assets, including gas stations, oil pipelines, oil terminals, refineries throughout the U.S. in order to satisfy this fake debt that was settled by this fake court. Through the process, oil industry rivals, including Shell, BP, and ExxonMobil, would gain a chance to expand their share of U.S. oil market by scarfing up Sitco's assets. As established in Chapter 9, though he posed as a disgruntled opposition figure, Vecchio was in fact a leading functionary for the U.S. oil industry that stood to gain from this shenanigan. And he spent much of his career employed as a lawyer for ExxonMobil. Vecchio's intimate ties to Exxon provided a possible explanation for his consistent defense of Hernandez. And Hernandez is the lawyer. It was it was not hard to imagine a scenario in which an oil giant profited from Sitco's liquidation. Quote, I was not aware of any of his relationships, said Rodriguez of Vecchio, telling me he was quite annoyed when he read Anya's expose on the lawyer's past. Not that I criticize anybody for working for Exxon, but to me, this sounds like the lawyers of Standard Oil Company in New Jersey 100 years ago writing Venezuelan laws. It's unacceptable. Yes, it is. Even to the opposition, it was very unacceptable. Though Hernandez endeavors to distance himself from Carrilex, his actions as Venezuela's fake top legal representative in the eyes of the U.S. courts reverberated beyond this single case. A quick review of the website for this fake court reveals there are roughly a dozen cases against Venezuela pending before the tribunal at the time this book was written. Meanwhile, since Carrilex's victory in Delaware, the fake court had granted additional corporate behemoths, including Koch Industries and Air Canada, favorable rulings against Venezuela's government. Taken together, these interests threatened to kill Citco once and for all because they had already set the precedent. With the Carrilex precedent in hand, Koch Industries immediately headed to Delaware to collect its debt by claiming its own stake in Citco. The Carrilex case has a lot of implications because it completely opens the door to the whole of Venezuelan assets in the United States. Remarkably, Carrilex was not the only corporate vulture that weaponized Hernandez's in its legal hunt for Citco. According to the fake court records, U.S. glassmaker Owens, Illinois, retained Hernandez as an quote-unquote expert witness in its own arbitration claims against Venezuela. The World Bank ruled in favor of Owens, Illinois in 2015, determining Venezuela's government owed it more than $455 million over a 2010 decision to nationalize two plants owned by the Ohio-based company. Owens, Illinois proceeded to mimic Carrilex's legal strategy against Citco. So it's literally a takedown of Citco. The essence of the complaint was familiar, including Citco's holding and Citco Petroleum as Delaware corporations. Like Carrilex, it seemed Owens, Illinois had directly benefited from Hernandez's failure to ensure Venezuela's coup regime followed proper procedure while managing the PDVSA, which is the mother company in Venezuela of Citco Oil. When confronted about his relationship with Owens, Illinois by a newspaper, Hernandez simply remarked, I was not a lawyer for the company, nor did I promote their interest. Public court documents directly contradict that claim, revealing Owens, Illinois had in fact paid Hernandez $163,000 in exchange for his quote-unquote expert witness testimony. Yet the lawyer dishonestly said that was not true. And it didn't end with questions over his compensation. Stunningly, in a bid to skirt responsibility for Citco's imminent destruction, Hernandez even claimed that he never analyzed the alter ego thesis nor its merits on behalf of the corporate clients like Owens, Illinois, and Carrilex. Carrilex characterized his contribution to their lawsuit quite differently, explicitly stating in a March 2019 court filing that before assuming his current position, Jose Ignacio Hernandez, special counsel to the Venezuelan National Assembly, because again, Guaido was basically the Speaker of the House, not the president, and had zero authority to be doing any of this. He was tasked with evaluating creditor claims against Venezuela, provided expert testimony supporting Krylik's alter ego arguments. Easily dispelled by a trail of court records, Hernandez's lies were apparent not only to Anya, but to Venezuelan's government and their opposition alike. On October 1st, 2019, Vice President Delele Rodriguez delivered a nationally televised press conference based on Anya's investigation into the Krylik's case, detailing what she described as a grand plot of organized transnational crime. Before a crowd of reporters gathered in her office, Rodriguez summarized the history as we just outlined, explaining the legal concept of alter ego and Hernandez's role in proving it applied to Citco. While detailing the corporate conspiracy, Rodriguez accompanied her denunciation of Hernandez, Vecchio, and Guaido with handheld photos of each coup official plastered with text reading, "Thief." Jose Ignacio Hernandez is a criminal mastermind behind the whole process to deprive Venezuela of its assets and resources abroad. Despite the well-deserved public shaming, Hernandez did not resign from Guaido's shadow government until June of 2020. Though the lawyer offered no explanation for his sudden departure, it came on the heels of yet another scandal regarding his conduct as a fake attorney general. On June 18th, Vice President Rodriguez's office published an audio recording of Hernandez's testimony before the opposition-controlled National Assembly Energy Commission earlier that month, during which the lawyer boasted of directing a strategy for Venezuela's legal fight with multinational corporations at the World Bank. In his own words, quote, "I personally oversaw a strategy directly with the World Bank president," unquote. Hernandez remarks compromised not only his authority, but that of the World Bank president and former U.S. Treasury Secretary, U.S. Treasury official David Malpass, Malpass. Malpass's alleged coordination with Hernandez flew in the face of the World Bank rules, which stipulated its officers shall not interfere in political affairs of any member, nor should it be influenced in their decisions by political character of the member or members concerned, meaning the countries, which they clearly violated. While Malpass's office ignored the leak, Hernandez announced his resignation from Guaido's fake government hours after the recording surfaced. Like his mentor, Ricardo Hassman, before him, Hernandez completely bungled his departure from the Venezuelan fake regime. Though he publicly announced his exit from Guaido's team on June 18th, Hernandez claimed to have submitted his resignation on May 28th, a clear attempt to downplay the significance of the embarrassing auto leak. Jorge Alondro Rodriguez, the Guaido critic among Venezuelan opposition, personally offered a $1,000 prize to anyone who could prove the lawyer did in fact resign in May. The circumstances surrounding Hernandez's resignation demonstrated the anti-Chavista opposition growing discontent with Guaido's fake regime. At the time of Hernandez's testimony in June of 2020, Several opposition parties were boycotting legislative committee hearings in protest of Guaido, having recognized opposition lawmaker Luis Parta as the interim president. So they basically fired Guaido from the only semi-legitimate, because remember, he staged the whole thing. He wasn't there. He tried to climb over the fence, all that stuff. So he has no authority in Venezuela at all at this point. As a result, the only parties present for Hernando's statement were those representing the extreme opposition of the G4 coalition. This meant that unless Venezuela's government spied on the meeting, Hernandez's comments had been leaked to the vice president's office by one of his supposed allies. The lawyer acknowledged the betrayal moments after the recording surfaced, complaining on X that the leak was only possible if there were internal participants. To fully illustrate Hernandez's corrupt character within the single chapter of a book represents a great task. Following his resignation from Guaido's fake regime, Anya discovered yet another nefarious mark on the lawyer's record, this time related to his work on behalf of foreign oil giants that had successfully defrauded Venezuela's government out of billions of dollars. The investigation was difficult, requiring Anya to go through heaps of court documents containing corporate and legal jargon until she reached the inner workings of a multi-billion-dollar fraud racket. From there, she traced the blueprints of a scheme that saw foreign oil companies coordinate with corrupt PDVSA functionaries in order to win favorable contracts with the state-run company, bilking Venezuelan's government of billions of dollars. The plot centered around a shady Panama-based consulting firm called HILSINGE, Helsige Incorporated. Having established this consulting firm, Helsing, amid Chavez's efforts to reform Venezuela's oil sector in early 2000s, former PDVSA functionaries Francisco Morella and Leonardo Baccario officially fled the country for Miami in 2004. From there, the pair leveraged their contacts within the PDVSA Caracas office to gain confidential information regarding Venezuela future oil contracts. Helsing then shared that information with its corporate oil industry clients, including Russia's Lukoil and Singapore's oil company, enabling them to crush competing bids with ease. Essentially, this consulting firm provided cover for a textbook insider trader conspiracy. The consulting fees it collected were simply bribes for corporate patrons furnished in exchange for an unauthorized leak of internal operations of the Venezuelan oil company. Clients like Lukoil from Russia compensated this consulting firm through Panama bank accounts, which served as money washing for funds that Murillo and Banquero then transferred to their corrupt PDVSA collaborators in Caracas. Classic insider trading. As a result of this contract rigging ploy, PDVSA purchased products from its international partners at inflated prices while selling its oil below market rate for years. One oil industry source familiar with the case estimated the scheme cost at Venezuela's government at least $15 billion in losses for PDVSA. Venezuela's government eventually caught wind of the racket and established a U.S.-based legal trust to investigate it. Headed by hotshot corporate attorney David Boyce, BOIES, in 2018, that trust filed a lawsuit against Helsinge, its oil clients, and PDVSA collaborators, and the international financial institutions that facilitated it. Despite a mountain of evidence presented to a Florida court, including emails, bank ledgers, sworn witness testimony detailing the fraud, Magistrate Judge Alicia Otaro Reyes ultimately dismissed the suit just 1 year after it was filed. Her decision was not based on the merits of the case, however, but on a technical argument put forward by the corporate defendants. Perhaps at this point in the tale of Venezuela's corporate coup, readers will be unsurprised to learn that Jose Hernandez applied the main line of defense for the multinational enterprise accused in the Helsinge scheme. So he was employed on behalf of the defendants to steal or justify the stealing of $15 billion from Venezuela. That's crazy. In August 2018, just 5 months before Guaido's tapped the lawyer as his top legal representative, the fake AG to the fake House of Representatives in Venezuela. The oil companies charged in the contract rigging scheme sought Hernandez's expert advice to save themselves in court. Hernandez's task was not to prove his client's innocent, but to invalidate the case brought against them by arguing the litigation trust that assembled the lawsuit was not valid under Venezuela law. The same Venezuelan law that he completely ignored in the Krillex case. His strategy was a success. On March 8, 2019, the Florida court announced that relying on the testimony of Professor Hernandez, it found that the trust agreement was void under Venezuela law, which it was not. Hernandez was handsomely rewarded for his corporate collaboration. Amid the pages of his August 2018 witness testimony, Hernandez disclosed that he had received $350 an hour for his work on behalf of the defendants. As with Krillex and Owens Corning, their investment in Hernandez paid big. Prior to his ascent within the Guaido coup regime, Hernandez served as the opposing team's star witness at least 3 separate legal battles involving the Venezuelan government in U.S. courts and international arbitration tribunals. Hernandez demonstrated habitual fidelity to his corporate clients after gaining nominal status as a fake attorney general in U.S. courts. A perverted allegiance that ultimately placed his country's most valuable asset, Citgo Petroleum, in peril. A Delaware court confirmed this fact in March 2023 when it ruled that 4 additional foreign corporations could collect debts owed by the Venezuelan state by seizing assets belonging to Citgo. Through this same alter ego argument that informed the judgment was nothing new. This time, the court explicitly cited the actions of Guaido's government that really didn't even exist for its basis. The court specifically asserted that Guaido's policy of treating Venezuelan sovereign debt as equal to debt incurred by its state oil company, PDVSA, in negotiations with foreign creditors, term crafted by the Harvard economic wizzo Ricardo Hassman himself, proved that Citgo's assets were in fact indistinguishable from the state. Beneficiaries of this March 2023 ruling included U.S. defense contractor Northrop Grumman and Ohio-based glassmaker Owens Corning, Illinois, the latter of which contracted Hernandez as an expert witness in its legal pursuit of Citgo. Days after the Delaware decision, members of Venezuela's once solidly pro Guaido G4 coalition called for a formal investigation into the conduct of these US based traitors. Though Hernandez's manner eventually forced his departure from official public life, his critics among Venezuelan opposition assured Anya their fight to hold him accountable did not end alongside the lawyer's service to Guaido. We have reasons to believe that Hernandez's conduct has to be investigated. And that came from the opposition leaders. The previous summer, Rodriguez and his party filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Justice Department urging an investigation to investigate Hernandez under the Foreign Corruption Practices, which barred U.S. citizens and entities from bribing foreign government officials in pursuit of business interests. Hernandez's brazen behavior also appeared to violate American Bar Association rules of professional conduct for attorneys, which stipulate, quote, a lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation involves a concurrent conflict of interest, unquote. At the time that the book was written, Washington continues to ignore Hernandez's probable violation of U.S. legal standards. Knowing that political instability in countries usually brings about white-collar crime, which we saw in Russia and other former republics, in the case of Venezuela right now, with this political turmoil, it is obvious the DOJ has to investigate Hernandez. This case, Rodriguez, the guy involved, must be investigated. Washington's refusal to investigate Hernandez raise questions. Was the corporate coup enabled by Washington and their recognition of Guaido merely a veil to grab Citco? Because that's in fact what it was used for, which is absolutely crazy. I just sent you a co-host, Bridget, and to SR. Renee here was here earlier, but then she disappeared. This next area, I'm going to try to get through the whole thing, so you'll have to bear with me because this one's very important. It's called Operation Gideon, Gideon. We've talked about gold. We've talked about oil. Venezuela is also known for large deposits of iron ore. The country is also home to what's called CACO, CACAO, which of course is the ingredient for chocolate. And they are one of the top crop producers for the coca plant. Though Venezuela is no longer a leading exporter of it, luxury chocolatiers still covet its crop. And its center of production are among the country's top tourist destinations, because we all love our chocolate. Spend enough time in Venezuela at a local area, and they will eventually try to get you to visit the area. It is a Caribbean beach town called Corani that is accessible via a 2-hour boat ride and a car ride down a dirt road winding through a cloud forest located in the country's oldest national park, Henry Pittier. The steamy mountain ranges that envelop Korani provide a perfect climate for the plants. Its neighbor, where they get these names? Chuao, Chuo, is also a base of this plant's production because it has rainforest mountainous areas next to the Caribbean Sea. The peaks of the mountains surrounding the area seem impenetrable. In fact, the village is only accessible by boat. Early on the morning of May 4th, 2020, local authorities in the area noticed a suspicious vessel bobbing in the distant sea. The fishermen alerted the colectivos and Venezuela's state security forces. And remember, the colectivos are their militia. They coordinated to apprehend the boat. On board, they discovered a cache of military equipment as well as 8 apparent mercenaries, 2 of which were U.S. citizens. The raid was part of Venezuela's response to what is known as Operation Gideon, a foiled plot to capture or kill President Maduro, led by a former U.S. Green Beret named Jordan. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Goudreau, Goudreau. While the conspiracy is subject to routine popular ridicule, often dubbed the Bay of Piglets, in reference to a bungled CIA attempted invasion of Cuba, Operation Gideon reminded ordinary Venezuelans of the threat they faced as the U.S. actively sought their government's overthrow. It also raised questions about how far the ideologues in Washington would go to achieve regime change. Perhaps one day there will be a dramatic biopic about Gordon Goudreau and his background. He was he had professional ties to, well, he actually set up a security firm, private security firm. His entry into the world of made-for-TV intelligence ops began with a childhood admiration of U.S. military. He was born in Canada and moved to the U.S. as a young man so that he could enlist in the U.S. Armed Forces, telling a family friend that he believed it would give him more challenges. Goudreau fought in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars as part of an elite Charlie Company in the 1st Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group before injuring himself and retiring from combat in 2016. 2 years later, he founded a private Florida-based security firm called Silvercorp USA. Silvercorp early promotional material had nothing to do with Latin America or mercenary missions. The first video posted on his Instagram page featured audio of a news report and 9/11 calls filed from the scene of U.S. school shootings from Stoneman Douglas to Sandy Hook, playing over grainy video of police, etc., saying last year more than 750,000 instances of violent crimes took place within the U.S. school system. That was Goudreau's narration of his promotion video. After portraying U.S. school children as sitting ducks surrounded by mass shooters, he went on to offer his solution to the bloodshed. A slow, eerie background music suddenly faded to electronic optimism as he informed the viewers that Silvercorp USA existed to remove threats, keep your family safe, and create opportunities for those who protect and serve our country. His plan was to hire a bunch of prior military people as security guards. Though through Silvercorp, Goudreau hoped to cash in on the elevated parental anxiety while bringing the counterinsurgency tactics he learned fighting the war on terror abroad back to the US. In his mind, his employees would apply their experience in Kabul and Columbine and move us on to a safer school environment. Silvercorp USA is there for you, he said in his video. Beyond the promotional video, it was unclear how he took his school security venture into actually applying it. There wasn't a lot on the website. The beauty of it is it's all for the price of a Netflix subscription. What he was trying to say is if you got all the parents to chip in like $12 a month, that the school could afford to have it self-guarded, basically is the nuts and bolts of it. According to his vision, parents would pay $8.99 a month to obtain security services for their children's school. On campus, Silvercorp employees would not only train school staff in tactics, but embed themselves in the faculty and deploy counterintelligence tactics against students. Speaking with the Post, he conjured up a highly implausible scenario during which he would root out potential school shooters, pretending to be a teacher. He'd be just, a cool shop teacher or something. His fantasies reflected a mentality that would soon lead him into directing an undermanned, undersupplied invasion of a foreign country that he had never visited and didn't understand. Though no schools nor parents had contracted his services at the time, his November 2018 rendezvous with the Post, Goudreau and Silvercorp would soon attain international notoriety that he craved. When his name first surfaced in media reports connected to Venezuela, the story was almost too absurd to believe. On May 1st, 2020, the AP, Joshua Goodman, published a story revealing the existence of a covert plan to ignite a popular rebellion in Venezuela that would culminate with the arrest of President Maduro. The plot, dubbed Operation Gideon, was to be carried out by 300 volunteer combatants, many of them Venezuelan defectors, who planned to sneak into the country from Colombia, raid military bases in an effort to turn soldiers toward their cause, and march towards Caracas in pursuit of the president. At the center of the blueprint was his private security company, Silvercorp USA, which had reportedly been contracted to oversee training and weapons procurement for the operation. Goodman based his report on interviews with over 24 opposition activists and would-be mercenaries with direct knowledge of or involvement in the operation. According to their accounts, Goudreau first linked up with Venezuelan opposition in February 2019 when he traveled to Colombia to provide security for the Live Aid concert that we talked about earlier in the book for Richard Branson. So it was infiltrated. The whole thing was a scam. He made contacts within Guaido's team that eventually led him to a Venezuelan military vet named Cliver Alcala. He was a former Army general, like the National Guard generals that the CIA turned into Cartel de la Sol. Yeah, same kind of operation. Alcala had been organizing low-level Venezuelan military deserters in Colombia since his own defection from Caracas in early 2019. Over the course of 2 days, Meeting at a Marriott, Alcala informed Godreau that he was overseeing roughly 300 men, including participants in previously botched assassination attempts against Maduro in camps scattered along Colombia's border with Venezuela. So we're going with a bunch of losers. But this time, it's not going to work either. Hoping to capitalize on the Trump administration's growing interest in toppling Maduro, Goodman explained to Godreau and Alcala, and they hatched a plan to train and equip these men for the plot that became Operation Gideon. Godreau told his new Venezuelan friends that the plan to kidnap or kill the country's president came with a high cost, what he estimated to be around $1.5 million. Thankfully, the gun for hire claim his high-level contacts in the Trump administration would help iron out operational kinks. And I'm sure that's probably Elliot Abrams and John Bolton. Indeed, Godreau had previously made contact with one of a security team by the name of Keith Schiller, SCHILLER, through industry contacts, and won a single Silver Corp contract to provide security for President Trump in November 2018. Still, no evidence ever materialized to prove the Oval Office had any role in Operation Gideon at all. In fact, sources close to Schiller told Goodman that he ended all contact with the ex-Green Beret after May 2019 meeting in Miami because he thought it was crazy. Despite limited resources and wanting interest from would-be patrons, Godreau and Alcala pushed ahead with their plot. Ephraim Matos, a retired Navy SEAL who spent 2 weeks training with the men in September 2019, told Goodman that soldiers lived in squalor conditions with no running water. They rationed food, they slept on the floor, and they were forced to train with sawed-off broomsticks in place of assault rifles. Nothing spells success like using brooms for guns. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cowboys in this business who try to peddle their military credentials into a big payday, Matos told Goodman. Though Goodman declined to speak on the record, Operation Gideon came to life within hours of the report's May 1st publication. Godreau Day in the Sun finally arrived in early morning hours of May 3rd, when Venezuela's government announced it had repelled an attempted maritime invasion of its borders. In a video statement posted on X that evening, Godreau sported a New York Yankees baseball cap as he knelt on one leg before a backdrop of trees. At 1700 hours, a daring amphibious raid was launched from the border of Colombia, deep into the heart of Caracas. The life-size G.I. Joe announced with his, in a sleeveless shirt. To Godreau's left, a Venezuelan military defector named Javier Quintero mimicked the former Green Berets' manufactured pose, clad in a flak vest, complete with a rolled-up Venezuelan flag. Quintero appeared to be auditioning for a supporting role. Quoted as saying, "Our units have activated in the southwest and east of Venezuela," Godreau said, declaring with confidence before he turned to his partner, who proceeded to deliver the Spanish equivalent, announcing Operation Gideon. The number one objective is to capture is the capture of the criminal organization that today unfortunately directs the destiny of the nation, Quintero said. According to Goodrow, a Venezuelan National Guard captain named Antonio Jose Sequela Torres was commanding the ongoing raid. He fled Venezuela in April of 2019 after he participated in Guaido's failed military rebellion and helped coordinated opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez's escape from house arrest. Goodrow and Quintero's decision to publicize Operation Gideon's launch was bizarre. By the time they published their statement, Venezuelan authorities had already captured 2 of their men and killed at least 6 others. Yet they pressed ahead, undeterred. Juan Jose Reardon was also an operator, at least according to a mythology he built around himself as a Latin American most coveted political consultant, known as the Latin American version of Karl Rove. Rendon's infamous gutter-style tactics led the region's most notorious U.S. collaborators to political victory in Mexico, Colombia, Honduras, and Dominican Republic. During Colombia's 2010 presidential campaign, a left-of-center Green Party contender threatened to defeat Washington's preferred candidate, Juan Manuel Santos. Faced with sinking poll numbers, the Santos team hired Rendon just 21 days before the election. In that short time, Rendon was credited with converting what had been a split race into a comfortable victory for Santos, who walked away with 69% of the vote. Colombian and U.S. media claimed the result was delivered by a Rendon-directed internet whisper campaign that spread rumors asserting Santos' opponent was a gay, foreign-born atheist. So Rendon is infamous for smear campaigns. He also counted a number of high-profile clients beyond Bogota, including Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, who won office in 2012, and Honduras's President Lobo Sosa, who came to power in 2010 after a U.S.-backed coup that removed the democratically elected leader, Jose Manuel Zelaya. A psychologist by training. Where have we seen that before? Rendon received 2 postdoctorates in psychology, which is in a weird psychology. Well, that's kind of redundant. That examines the links of one's physical well-being to a subconscious, positing that diseases like cancer are the product of your inner manifestations. He presented himself as a political mystic, typically accenting his soft features and designer dress that looked like it belonged in Miami. Journalists granted the privilege of visiting Rendon's residence in Miami in their financial center tend to produce fawning profiles of him with talking about the gold trinket, samurai swords, and Buddha shrine, all that makes up his house. Throughout 2019, the condo in the upscale district provided the backdrop for planning for Operation Gideon. The political consultant's involvement in Operation Gideon came to light in the botched raid's immediate aftermath, when Goodrow turned to the media to blame the plot's failure on Rendon and his colleagues in Guaido's shadow government. Around the time that Goodrow took responsibility for the attack via X, he hopped online for an interview with a Miami-based YouTuber, a popular personality among Venezuela's anti-Chavista expat community. In a since deleted live stream called Proof That Guaido Signed the Contract, Goodrow shared his side of Operation Gideon for the first time, explaining that while he initially refused an offer to discuss with the AP to discuss his contract with Venezuelan opposition out of professionalism, he decided it was time to publicize the agreement after associates failed to uphold their end of the bargain. Typically, I'm never going to come out and share a contract, but men's lives are at stake, he said. He appeared to be in the same mystery outdoor location as well, with early evening sun and the foliage behind him. The contract, later partially published online, established a general service agreement to help liberate Venezuela. The former Green Beret claimed that dozens of his men had spent the preceding weeks living in a cemetery located near the Colombian border with Venezuela, evading local police to carry out Operation Gideon. You had 60 Venezuelans who were hungry, still training, thinking about liberation. His men's dire conditions was the fault of Guaido and his allies, who Goodrow claimed failed to follow through on their contracted obligations to finance the mission. Who violated it, he was asked. He flipped through a stack of papers and held a singular sheet up for the camera, revealing 4 signatures: his own, Rendon's, that of Guaido advisor Sergio Vergara, and a purportedly scribbled signature, which was purported to be Guaido's. The 5th signature was a lawyer named as a witness, Manuel J. Urita. I have never seen the level of backstabbing and complete disregard for men in the field, Goodrow went on. Mercenaries get paid. No one paid me and my team a cent, claiming he ultimately crowdfunded the operation by soliciting support from average Venezuelans around the world. I want these guys to live, and I want them to succeed. Within hours of this interview, on May 4th, a second group of Goodrow's men attempted to invade Venezuela via a remote northern coastal town. That's the people we were talking about at the beginning. These were the ones apprehended by the local fishermen, militia, and police. By the time Operation Gideon ended, Venezuelan authorities had killed at least 6 of his troops and captured 47, including Sequia and 2 U.S. citizens, Luke Denman and Arian Berry. A second high-level Venezuelan military defector, Army Captain Robert Colina Ybarra, was among those killed. Venezuelan's government published images of the equipment that was recovered in the raids, including rifles, satellite phones, and helmets emblazoned with U.S. flags on state television. Photographs of the arrest showed several of Goodrow's grunts, including Denman and Berry, face down on the pavement of a small fishing village with their hands behind their backs. Another image, members of the intelligence branch stood with the detainees, which included Denman and Berry, on the beach next to a police van. The photos were a morale boost to the Venezuelan population. Speedboats, mercenaries, large-scale weapons, vehicles with machine guns installed, said the television host over Venezuelan TV. They underestimated us again, the reporter said. According to the Venezuelan intelligence, they had been monitoring Operation Gideon from across the border. AP Press was told we knew everything, some of their meetings, everything. Goodrow himself contended that Operation Gideon had been compromised, making vague references to Cubans from the regime who had infiltrated the plot. Goudreau's claim to an alleged contract with Guaido and his advisors placed Rendens on the defensive, with the responsibility for dead men and captured ex-Venezuelans placed directly on his high-rent doorstep. The political spinmeister launched a damage control campaign. Rendon's version of events appeared on May 6th in none other than the Washington Post, reporting how Venezuelan opposition leaders had smoozed with Goudreau at the consultant's glittering Miami high-rise, complete with obligatory mention of Rendon's room. Guaido's tapped Rendon, a Venezuelan native, to lead a covert strategic committee tasked with investigating ways to forcibly remove Maduro from power. We went through every law possible, Rendon later told Vice. In our process, we discovered we cannot use law. So we studied what it is possible if someone else, a third party, whoever, to pick up like bounty hunters in the US and present him to justice, maybe to collect the reward. Rendon's search for bounty hunters eventually led him to Goudreau, who claimed to be training hundreds of men in Colombia for a mission to capture Maduro. Though he admitted to signing the civil court contract and paying Goudreau $50,000, Rendon said he ceased all communication with the former Green Beret after he demanded the $1.5 million retainer fee. Rendon insisted that he and others within Guaido's circle, including the interim president, the fake president, eventually grew suspicious, you think, and began to doubt key elements of the plan. Rendon told the Post that as of November 2019, he and his allies believed Operation Gideon was defunct. While much of Rendon's story matched with Goudreau's version of events, he contradicted one key element of the ex-Green Beret's statements. Hush! Hold on just a second. My husband's coming back from his meeting. Though Goudreau had published a contract that included Guaido's signature, Rendon insisted Venezuelan coup leader never signed the agreement and only had limited information regarding the outline. But he knew. So did Rendon. They were actively involved as civilians in a coup against a foreign government. Even this admission undermined Guaido's official statement on Operation Gideon, which not only asserted he didn't sign the contract, but that he had no idea it was even going on. In response to Guaido's cries of innocence, Goudreau published an audio recording purporting to document the moment Venezuelans' US-backed fake government, whom he referred to as President Guaido, signed the agreement. I do have concerns, but we are doing the right thing for our country, the voice that's Guaido's said. Who was telling the truth? Anya tried to call as many as the characters involved in Operation Gideon while she was writing the book. The phone rang once, and Goudreau answered it on her first attempt to reach him. It was May 4th, hardly a day since Venezuelan authorities first responded to Operation Gideon, and hours after they had detained a second group of Goudreau's men, including 2 U.S. citizens. He admitted that they were his guys. In light of the open disdain he expressed for Venezuelans' opposition figures while speaking on the video that had been published already and now taken down, Anya tried to establish a connection with Goudreau based on their shared experience dealing with Guaido's unsavory characters. He told her, I would definitely talk to you tomorrow. It's just that I'm kind of in the middle of containing this crisis. The former special ops soldier sounded stressed, and who could blame him? She agreed to call him back, but by then, he had went off the radar. The following afternoon, AP revealed the U.S. government had opened a federal investigation into the former Green Beret for arms trafficking, a move that virtually muzzled him from any future media events. Though she was interested in his dealings with Guaido, she was far more preoccupied with his relationship to Washington, which U.S. officials knew about Operation Gideon, she wanted to know. Had any of them provided any logistical support? And it was very interesting that Washington immediately gagged him. Drew White was listed as Silvercorp's chief operating officer on tax documents. On May 5th, Anya spoke with White for roughly 17 minutes. According to White, Goodrow was a great guy whom he considered a brother. He was a best man at my wedding, he said. White was also an ex-U.S. Special Forces operative who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He told me that he fought alongside him overseas as a teammate, then partnered with him to launch Silvercorp, following their respective departures from the military. Yet at its inception, Silvercorp's mission was a far cry from regime change. White was concerned about that because he had founded a private security company, not a mercenary firm. Like many of Goodrow's friends and allies, White said he declined his colleague's proposal to participate in Operation Gideon. White had left the company and was running a company out in Colorado Springs. He said, I own several companies around here. I have priorities, and it's not regime change. Reflecting on Goodrow's pitch for Operation Gideon, White recalled, my gut check was like, I don't want to be part of this. White explained the original, when he was originally contacted and offered to participate in what Goodrow called a State Department operation. Who was running the State Department? Oh, that would be the guy that used to run the CIA, called Mike Pompeo. He said his friend produced what was presented as a State Department contract. That, upon further review, seemed a bit odd. Though he confessed prior knowledge of the harebrained plot, like Rendon, White expressed surprise at Goodrow's decision to follow through with it, given all the problems. He was especially preoccupied with the fate of Luke Denman and Arian Barry, who had all been teammates with them. I just wish the guys went back to doing the school security stuff. Why did Jordan Goodrow claim to have a State Department contract? Was he a patsy placed in the line of fire for more powerful forces behind Operation Gideon? Though Venezuela's government charged Washington with overseeing the scheme and had arrested 2 U.S. citizens involved in it, the Trump administration said they had nothing to do with it. Mike Pompeo denied any knowledge. If we had been involved, it would have gone differently, Mike Pompeo said. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Who knows? We've had a lot more failures in coup regime changes than we have successes, even though we've had over 90 successes. We've attempted at least 400. If there are, in fact, Americans that are there, then we can figure a path forward, Mike Pompeo went on to say. At the time of his press conference, Venezuelan had already published images of the 2 U.S. and their passports, so he knew damn good and well we had Americans there. On the same afternoon that Pompeo fielded questions from reporters, Venezuelan authorities broadcast video statements from the 2 Americans. In their confession, Barry and Denman discussed their respective experiences in the U.S. military and explained that they had met Gaudreau while serving overseas. Both men told their interrogators they traveled to Colombia in January of 2020 to carry out a job on behalf of their former special ops teammate. According to Denman, their agenda was to meet a group of Venezuelans in Colombia, train them, and come with them to Venezuela to Caracas. He was told the U.S. government would dispatch a plane to collect Maduro. When Denman and Berry departed from the Colombian coast aboard a fishing boat, accompanied with a team of 60 or so hungry men, they genuinely expected to be greeted as liberators. Upon their arrival, the high-level military commander, rank-and-file soldiers, and average citizens joined their march. They expected them to join their march to the capital, sweeping out Maduro. They didn't know they were going to end up in handcuffs. It is difficult to explain why they went ahead with what many neutral observers considered a suicide mission. If not for Venezuela's prior knowledge of the plot and those involved, there's a good chance both men would have been killed during the operation because they went ashore where armed militia was. According to Drew White, Denman and Berry had been pretty closed about their participation in Operation Gideon. Still, he insisted he told everyone with the plan that it didn't seem viable. Shortly after Anya published her phone call with White, Luke Denman's younger brother, Mark, reached out to Anya on X. Though the Denman and Berry families opted to avoid public spotlight in the following days, Mark talked to Anya. Quote, "As far as I know, my brother Luke was deep sea diving," unquote. He went on to say, "Obviously, I know my brother's history and background, and when I saw Operation Gideon in the news, it piqued my interest. And then it really piqued my interest when I saw Gordon's name attached to it because he was one of Luke's unit buddies." During their phone call, Mark said that he was relieved to know that Luke and Arian was alive and that they appeared to be healthy, and the video confessions aired on Venezuelan television. He related that although he comes from a large family that included 6 siblings, Luke talked with Arian and Jordan as if they were brothers. They're like 6-man teams, special units. They all treat each other as brothers. According to Mark, that trust ultimately convinced his big brother to travel to Colombia with Gaudreau, who offered him a job in Operation Gideon. Arian, meanwhile, left his wife and kids behind in Germany, where he had settled following his 2013 departure from the military. Luke Denman told Venezuelan authorities that he expected to receive somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 for the operation. Instead, he and Berry received charges of terrorism, illegal weapons trafficking, conspiracy, and each faced up to 35 years in prison for their involvement in the attempted coup. In October 2020, Gaudreau filed a $1.4 million lawsuit against Rendon in Florida court, accusing the Venezuelan political consultant of contract breach. As part of the lawsuit, Gaudreau revealed more details to support his claim that Operation Gideon was a U.S.-backed plot, naming 2 mid-level federal officials that he was aware of that was involved in the planning. Gaudreau contended that Silvercorp beat out competing proposals for a private military operation to oust Maduro, including one that had been put forward by Eric Prince, but Prince denied that. He also insisted the knowledge of the plot permeated at a much higher level than mid-level in U.S. government. According to Gaudreau, not only did Guaido become involved, but Leopoldo Lopez, the ringleader of Venezuela's U.S.-backed opposition, had been briefed on the operation as well. I mean, otherwise, how would he even know his name? Goodrow honesty was immediately questioned. His lawsuit was designed to make Operation Gideon seem legitimate. Yet the only U.S. government officials he claimed to have met with was Jason Beardsley, an advisor to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Andrew Horn, an advisor to Mike Pence. Both men refused to speak with the media, while Pence's office denied any knowledge. Regardless of their relationship with Goodrow, neither man held the rank of someone that would be tasked with overseeing a covert operation on behalf of the U.S. government. Now, I would not have expected Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North to be tasked with that either, but he was. So the rank of the individual has literally nothing to do with that. And it was out of the vice president's office using his national security advisor that Iran-Contra was ran with Donald Gregg and Felix Rodriguez. And Felix Rodriguez was basically the forward deployed guy running the El Salvador El Pabatango, or whatever the name of that airport was. And he didn't even have an official job in the administration other than being attached to the CIA. So, who knows? Goodrow was not the only player swept up in Gideon drama who claimed the U.S. government had operational knowledge. Cliver Alcala, the retired Venezuelan general who initially hatched the plot alongside Goodrow, also asserted the CIA and other U.S. agencies was aware. According to his attorneys, Alcala's effort to overthrow Maduro's government was reported to the CIA, National Security Council, John Bolton, and the Department of Treasury. Alcala's character his character climaxed weeks before details of Operation Gideon even surfaced in the media. On March 23, 2020, Colombian authorities intercepted a truck carrying arms that appeared destined for the Venezuela border. While authorities initially believed the supplies were meant for local guerrillas or gangs, Alcala posted a video statement on March 26 claiming responsibility for the weapons shipment. On his X account from his apartment in Colombia, Alcala proceeded to announce his involvement in a military operation against the Maduro government, which he claimed to have planned alongside Guaido and Rendon, which seems very odd. You don't usually announce coups on X, I'm just saying. On the day of Alcala's extraordinary confession, the U.S. State Department just happened to indict President Maduro on drug trafficking charges and announced a $15 million reward for information leading to his arrest. You see the problem with that? When you do that, it's almost as if you want somebody to plan one of these events. That's very problematic. In conjunction with the prize Maduro bounty, the State Department issued bounties for other officials, including Dioscado Cabello and Tariq El Asami. That's weird. They were the Minister of Industry and Production. And oddly, Cliver Alcala. And don't forget, when they do this, when they announce those indictments in the past, it has been done to protect them. So the coup plotter in Colombia was on the list of people that was targeted by the State Department, meaning you can't investigate them if you find them. The episode intensified intelligence intrigue surrounding Gideon. Why did U.S. file charges against Alcala, even though he had already defected from Venezuelan's government? We know why. Why did Alcala reveal details of Gideon, including the involvement of Guaido and Rendon, before turning himself in to U.S. authorities? Most puzzling, why did Operation Gideon move forward even after Alcala, its commander, had been arrested and taken to the U.S.? These are some of the most bewildering questions to emerge on the plotline of Operation Gideon, an event that marked perhaps singularly most fantastic chapter in the fake Guaido coup. The Venezuelan government source once posited to Anya that a faction of Colombia's intelligence service opposed Operation Gideon and had set out to sabotage the plot with its March 23rd weapons seizure. If that were the case, perhaps Alcala saw the writing on the wall. Operation Gideon was doomed. On top of possible reservations in Bogota, a Vice investigation later asserted the CIA gained prior knowledge of the operation and had dispatched a representative to advise Goodrow against proceeding with it. These details suggested that some figures involved in Gideon, such as Alcala, may have gotten cold feet as the mission approached. But why would U.S. authorities charge and detain him if he had cooperated? Because that's how they protect him. Images of Alcala's arrest may provide an answer to the first question. In a video footage of the moment the former Venezuelan general boarded a DEA plane in Colombia, he is seen wearing a dress shirt, black slacks, and shakes hands with and even hugs a group of suited up men on the tarmac. That's coming to get him like he knew him. Following his goodbye, Alcala carried his own luggage aboard the DEA plane and flew to New York City. Though they had charged him with conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism and other drug-related crimes, U.S. authorities did not handcuff their prisoner, instead presenting a perplexing image of him being a buddy. Had Alcala U.S. handlers merely offered him a comfortable exit from Colombia and Operation Gideon as the plot fell apart? Although mystifying images invited speculations, we may never know. And oh, by the way, they charged him with drugs. He had nothing to do with drugs. He was trafficking weapons. So eventually the case will get dismissed, if it hasn't already. At the center of the State Department operation in Venezuela was James Story. James Story. That name keeps coming up. He's a career Foreign Service officer from South Carolina who took over Washington's Caracas charge d'affaires in July 2018. In February 2019, AP profiled him as a steely huntsman at the helm of the embattled U.S. Embassy in Caracas. Story arrived in Venezuela just 5 months before the U.S. recognition of the Guaido regime. In his memoirs, Pompeo personally credited Story with spearheading the campaign to whip up Venezuelan opposition in support of Guaido. Though Story served in a global array of U.S. embassies, including Mossack in Afghanistan, which is where I ran across him first, the diplomat's fluency in Spanish and Portuguese eventually grounded him in Latin America. Story held a variety of posts in the region before moving to Caracas, including Rio, Brazil. His other resume highlights included a stint of the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, Office for Foreign Western Hemisphere, as well as assignments directing INI operations in Colombia. Founded in 1978, INL was a division of the State Department that monitored international narcotics and did nothing about them. They monitored them for the CIA. During his time at INL in Bogota, Story oversaw the U.S. government's controversial fumigation program in Colombia, which we've talked about, which was supposed to get rid of the coca plants, but actually was getting rid of crops that farmers were using because they wanted the land to grow coca plants. It also caused widespread cancer and health defects in people because they didn't pay any attention to any of the peasants that were in the area. So that was what Story oversaw. Upon landing in Caracas years later, Story's strong command of the Spanish language and Southern charm enabled him to ingratiate himself into Venezuelan opposition circles with ease. Throughout his brief stay in Venezuela, Story was unashamed of his close corroboration with the opposition forces. You're supposed to be there working with the government, not their opposition. In a Facebook post from March 3rd, 2019, he shared a photo of himself hiking with a former opposition presidential candidate and said, "The Venezuelan people love him." Not their president, this other guy who's the opposition to the president. When Guaido returned to Venezuela from a regional tour the following afternoon, Story was on the freshly minted coup leader's heels almost immediately. Venezuela's fake president is back. He actually called him an interim president. On Facebook postings, Story's overtly partisan activities represented the kind of behavior considered uncouth for diplomats in foreign assignments. You're not supposed to just be walking around with the opposition. You're supposed to at least pretend you're there to work on behalf of the U.S. government with the actual government. Venezuelan's government kicked Story out of the country shortly following Washington's recognition of Guaido. Venezuela's fake president had no power to ensure Story remained in the country, which tells you everything about who was actually running the country. After a brief return to the States, Story established a virtual U.S. embassy in Venezuela, housed in a Washington diplomatic office in Bogota. So he went back to Colombia. From there, he managed a command post for Venezuela U.S.-backed opposition as they mapped out regime changes in Caracas. Story was so fond of Venezuela opposition, in fact, that he eventually hosted private gatherings of Guaido allies at his Bogota house. In February of 2021, Venezuelan opposition leaders, including Leopoldo Lopez and Vecchio, traveled to Colombia's capital to attend a closed-door summit at a local Marriott. There, over the course of several days, they enjoyed valuable FaceTime with U.S. officials and mulled over options for transitioning the Venezuelan government, as in the Office of Transition Initiatives. The secret meeting's agenda was subsequently leaked to Venezuela's government and published online. According to the leaked details, the summit kicked off with a barbecue at Story's private home. Story later confirmed the party took place, boasting in his weekly YouTube live stream. Holy crap. Story complimented his open affection for Washington's anti-democratic Venezuelan shock troops with raging contempt for the government actually running Venezuela. When a military coup ousted Bolivian President Evo Morales in 2019, Story took to his Facebook in celebration. You know, the guy that got rid of the coca plants being illegally trafficked over to Colombia. They were really excited about that. Proud the brave people of Bolivia. Proud of. It was a military coup. They installed a dictator, overthrowing the democratically elected president. And then went on to say, Venezuela will also one day be free of tyranny. Several months following Story's forecast of regime change in Venezuela, Goodrow's ragtag band made its way to the coast. Alcala and Goodrow planned Operation Gideon in Bogota, where Story is also planning regime change in Venezuela. Just saying. What gave Goodrow the impression that he was working on a State Department contract? Could it have been the State Department representative in the fake Venezuelan embassy in Bogota? Did Story have any knowledge of Operation Gideon? Then there's the obvious question: how many U.S. citizens able to travel to Colombia, ship arms into the country, and oversee military training camps inside a sovereign country called Colombia without the ambassador knowing it, including Americans who had to issue the visas to get in the country to begin with? Just a few questions I have. Then consider the statement Secretary Pompeo delivered April 29th, days before Gideon went into effect. Quote, "In Venezuela, I am pleased to report that a multilateral effort to restore democracy is continuing to build momentum. I've asked my team to update our plans to reopen the U.S. Embassy in Caracas so we're able to be ready. As soon as Maduro steps aside, I am confident that we will raise the flag again in Caracas," like literally days before this mission launches. What made Pompeo so optimistic that Maduro was going to be regime changed and Story was going to go back to Caracas? Considering Story's past work in the State Department Narcotics Division, did he have any role in the decision to offer $15 million rewards for information leading to Maduro's capture day before Gideon's launch, providing a direct incentive for any wannabe bounty hunters? We may never know the answer to that. However, on May 6th, President Trump upgraded Story's, his title at the time was Charge d'Affaires for Venezuela, because they don't actually have an ambassador, because they're not actually in Venezuela. But he was nominated to be the ambassador of Venezuela located in Colombia. Crazy. Though the deepest questions concerning Gideon remain unanswered, there's increasing evidence that at least high-level U.S. officials had prior knowledge of the plan. In his memoirs, A Sacred Oath, Mark Esper shared his impression that members of Trump's National Security Council, i.e. John Bolton, were collaborating with Venezuelan extremist oppositions in a mysterious plot. He described a February 2020 White House Cabinet Room meeting during which U.S. and Guaido officials discussed possible scenarios of a small special operation targeted directly at Maduro. Then, out of the blue, one of Guaido's colleagues looked at Esper across the table and said something like, "We have some plans you, the U.S. government, know we are working on. They're not ready yet." Crazy. It was also noted that Guaido's ally made some quick reference to Florida before making eye contact with another person in the room that was working for John Bolton. That person was Cliver Carone. Claver, Claver, smiled back and nodded. Esper continued in his description of the meeting. "I looked directly at him about 15 feet away from me down the table to my left. He turned to me and our eyes met. His face immediately went blank. Something was up." Esper let his suspicion pass, relating that he proceeded to dismiss himself from the meeting to tend to obligations at the Pentagon. Yet other participants in the Venezuelan NSC summit stayed for quite some time. Esper noted, I probably should have stayed too. When Operation Gideon went into effect roughly 3 months later, Esper said he wondered if this was the plan referred to by Guaido's team at the White House back in February. Though Venezuela's government and its supporters characterize Esper's narrative as a confession of U.S. involvement in Operation Gideon, his words could just as easily been interpreted as spin. By emphasizing his exit from the meeting once discussions turned to a covert Venezuelan plot, Esper separated himself as a representative of Washington and the military from the planning. So, regardless of whether Washington was directly involved in Operation Gideon, there's no question the U.S. policy towards Venezuela drove Goodrow and his friends to follow through with their reckless plot. What purpose did the State Department decision in offering $15 million reward for Maduro's arrest otherwise serve? According to Esper, the narco trafficking charges against Maduro were the brainchild of William Barr, who convinced the U.S. president that a renewed focus on Washington's drug war in Latin America was the most effective way to pressure Venezuela's government, a proposal the defense secretary accepted as a reasonable alternative to direct military intervention, except Venezuela isn't the one responsible for the drugs. That would be Colombia. Barr's hand in crafting the premium on Maduro's head was revealing. In 1989, Barr, then the advisor to the Justice Department, authored a legal memo that provided justification for the U.S. invasion of Panama. I'm sure that's a coincidence. The ensuing Operation Just Cause, which George H.W. Bush administration launched in December 20th, 1989, resulted in the arrest of Panama's then president Manuel Noriega on drug trafficking charges, the exact same thing they were trying to do to Maduro. After 30 years later, Barr did basically the same thing to Maduro. The end of that chapter. That's freaking crazy. Weird how these same names keep coming up, doing the exact same thing time after time after time. I believe Bridget and I call that a pattern. Bridget, I tried to throw you. Go ahead, SR. I tried to throw Bridget the mic. Go ahead.
Thank you, Colonel. And thank everyone for adjusting time zones and everything else for us to be here with us on X and Rumble. And we know the Colonel's busy, and boy, we enjoy every minute we get with her. But I came out with 3 points out of all of this. First of all, I think I heard you say, and if I'm wrong, I'll be corrected, that the AP stated they knew all about this operation, which means to me somebody leaked it. Second, there's still a Twitter presence of James Story. He's on Twitter now. For anybody that wants to tag him, if you want to, I posted it in the pill. But given that, and given where we see in my third point, you have the press that makes these accusations, or shall I say, pushes people into doing things they want them to do or want them to believe. And to me, that coincides with the government and your exact statement concerning $15 million on the head of this man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why else?
I see it tracking all together. It just blows my mind.
It's crazy. And the timing of it was all perfectly orchestrated. But yet they say it's all just a coincidence. We learned probably 2 or 3 weeks into our research of Operation Gladio is there's no such thing as a coincidence.
Well put. Patterns, rinse, wash, repeat. Patterns, over and over and over again. And I posted a bunch of articles and interesting links on Operation Gideon up in the or down in the pill and up in the Megatron.
Cool. Oh,
I did want to mention something else about Story. Not only is he on Twitter, he's affiliated with institutions, with Georgetown University's Institute for the Study of Diplomacy.
which is one of the CIA's favorite recruiting tools.
You got it, Colonel.
Yeah. And obviously, as we have learned, the State Department people that follow the drugs around are all part and parcel of the coup regimes as well. So, yeah, that's very interesting. Bridget, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
There was one of the articles that I posted was the ex-Marine who was involved in it and how he came out and did scream quite loudly about how this was all planned, this was all set up, and he was being abandoned by our government. Geez, doesn't that sound familiar? Just saying.
Yeah, definitely sounds familiar. Yeah, very familiar actually.
Yeah, since your earlier post, I thought that would.
Yeah,
It's just a shame that
they use us. That they use the military.
Yes, ma'am.
Over and over and over again. Whenever it's convenient, and then they abandoned you. Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
And that actually goes back to that interview. I mean, yours is a perfect example to get the interview that was done the other day that I forwarded to you on, what was it, not Bin Laden. Yeah, it was, anyway, and all this other, they don't take care of their people, and it's a shame, and it's embarrassing, and it needs to be brought to light.
Yeah.
Because I don't think most normal civilians know how trampled on our military is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to tell that one story. There's so many stories. There's so many stories. So many stories. and not just my story. I definitely have a story, but I spent 22 years trying to fix other people's bad stories through the Board of Corrections of your military records, BCMR process, when the military would screw them over in trying to help them because of my extensive knowledge of the regulations, laws, and DoD directives. I had a greater insight than normal military members into how to right wrongs done to people. And so there's so many stories that need to be told about how the military goes about their business and not in a very flattering way. But since it is an institution that is paid for by the American people need to have that information to demand change. So, anyway, I mean, and it's kind of a dual-edged sword. It's the military is such a camaraderie and family. It's like talking to strangers about shit that goes on in your family. You know, when you're a kid and you grow up in a dysfunctional house, you don't want to go around and blab about all the crap that goes on in your house. Um, for lots of different reasons. And that's what it feels like. It feels like you're ratting out your own family when you talk about the things that actually go on in the military. Because when you spend 30 years in an organization like that and you deploy with people and you're a family and you depend on those people sometimes for in life and death. And that's why I think they take advantage of the esprit de corps within our special operations, is because there's no greater bond in our family. They're like Siamese twins. When you get on a SEAL team, when you get on one of the black teams or that are at JSOC, you spend the better part of your life 24/7. Literally, your life depends on those people. So you function more as a Siamese twin as opposed to even family members. That's how close you are. And the when one, as demonstrated in the story, when one gets involved in something, you feel like you have to go to protect your brothers. And the CIA and these nefarious people play on that esprit de corps of these teams to manipulate them. I've read,
Well put.
yeah,
Well put.
I've read quite a few stories about they felt a compelling need once one makes a bad decision to go protect the one that made the bad decision. And that happens in normal day life, even while you're at home when you go to a bar or whatever. It's it takes on, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it takes on kind of a gang mentality that we've grown up with, that if you attack one of the members, they're going to come back, and they're going to come back with a bunch of their brothers. So it's people just need to know that that's the way it is. It's like and I can use, to make it a little bit lighter, I can definitely break that up. I used to fight like cats and dogs with my sisters, but no one else was allowed to touch them. And that's literally what it's like.
Good analogy. I get that.
Yeah. So, anyway, crazy book, isn't it? It gives you a complete.
Yes, it is, Colonel.
Yeah, it gives you a completely different look on the situation. And
by the way, I did post that link to that interview with Max Blumenthal in the pill, and I also posted it out there on Rumble.
Thank you. Yeah, and everything that I could find, not that I doubted, but I always do check. If you try to verify all of this information, there is information out there about all of this. The problem, obviously, is the short attention span of most people. Is it dribbles out over over years, and you're only getting the news of the day, not the context of how the news of the day blends in with the prior news reporting, because they're not very good at doing that, because they're pushing a narrative. And when you get it all concisely put down, as Anya did in this book, it definitely builds a completely different narrative than the one we got in snippets. So
100%, Colonel. And what's really important about all of this, as I see it, is this is back in 2020. We're not talking
right.
100 years ago.
Yeah, we're not talking 50 years ago, Iran Contra.
We're not talking 50 years ago.
Yeah.
We're talking today.
Yeah. and we're still being manipulated. That's what I find so interesting about the narratives now that you can watch trending on X. They all come out with the exact same talking point, and you'll get it 50 times with slightly different wording, but it's the exact same narrative. It's like psychologically trying to convince us that this point is true. And if I say it 50 times, that makes it true. It's still absolutely ridiculous. But now I feel so much more competent to be able to see those where in the past you might have initially thought, that could be true. Now they just all seem so ridiculous and so ridiculously obvious that they're lying. So that's how I think this whole journey has been beneficial to all of us. So, anyway, okay, this session went a little bit longer, but I didn't want to break up that Operation Gideon chapter. I wanted to get that all in. So, anyway, we will be back tomorrow at our normal time. We will be on X and not interactive on X, but it will be played on X. We will be interactive on Rumble tomorrow at noon with War Hamster, and then back at 4 for our next chapter, which, let's see, talks about it. We're going to talk a little bit about we'll be able to do a little bit about a little more in depth into the gold, and she talks, the next chapter is about election, but not in like smartmatic in detail like I did the research on well, that we all did the research on, but and then that basically ends this book. She has like an afterword, but it doesn't really, it's just kind of an overview of the book and her summary. So we don't need that. We have 2 chapters. They're both very short chapters that we will do tomorrow. And we will be done with this book. And so next week, we're going to start on our Mafia, CIA, and George Bush book. And it's going to be a challenge to do that book without getting too bogged down in all of the names. So we'll just have to wade our way through it. We need enough detail so you can understand the premise of what's going on, but not too much detail. And the book has a lot of names. It's going to be very easy to get lost in all of the names. And the author, I noticed, at least in this big book that I did on the Underground Empire, every time he hadn't talked about somebody in a while, he would remind you who it is. This guy does it a little bit, but not enough for me to have not had to go back and find the guy's name again to figure out who the heck that one was. So it's going to be a challenge, but I do want you guys to understand. And it deals with the failed savings and loans and the mafia and the CIA's connections to it. So it's a very important piece of our puzzle. Anyway, if no one else has anything else, we're going to hit the road, and you guys have a nice rest of your evening, and I will see you tomorrow at noon and then again at 4. Take care, everybody. See ya.